All right, we're live. Hi, Stanley. How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah. So I've been meaning to ask, your hair, is it is that how it is naturally, or did you apply anything to it?
No, I don't. No, I don't do anything to it. It's how it is. Every now and again I have to put conditioner or something, but no, it's one of these days I'll get a haircut.
When
But
last did you get a haircut?
it's kind of funny because the last time I saw my father, he's like, "Well, what are you gonna do? Put it in braids?" So I started laughing. I'm like, "Well, no, I'm 57 and I have hair. It's just a celebration.
Cool.
Total
So, uh,
vanity. Total vanity.
well, what's life without a little vanity?
Hey, I don't I I'm not looking to get a girl. So, I'm just
Why?
hanging out. So
Good
what
looking
have
man,
you been up to?
good good looking man like you should be looking to get a girl.
Ah, so how's the kids?
A
How's
kid.
life?
Yeah, fine, fine. I just have one kid, so yeah.
Why did I think you had a second child?
No, I just have one daughter.
Well, good. You'll need another.
Maybe, maybe not.
Don't let her be an only child, Charles.
Really, what's the downside to that?
You know, I we'll have to talk because it's totally off subject. Um, and I think maybe I've talked to you about it before. I don't know. I think there should always be two kids, and because my wife and I were, you know, basically she was 40 when my son was born, and I was 41. He was such a great child. It's like, do we really want to push our luck? Um, because once you get that, to that 40 mark, you know, um, we got it right once.
That's good. That's good.
Now, had we been 30, we might have had 10 kids.
Or 11, so you just complete a football team.
Exactly.
So, let's get right into the topic for today. I sent you, I posted on the Discord the podcast of Adam B. Coleman. I think I also posted it on this channel where he talked about the importance of racial self identification for Black Americans and how Republicans are overlooking that. Right, Republicans want them to share their racial identity to take on an American identity. Right, and he thinks it's a mistake. He thinks that being Black means a lot to African Americans, and telling them to not be Black is not a winning message. It's not a winning strategy. It's actually a losing strategy. So he gave this statistics of about 74% of African Americans say that their race means a
74,
lot
yeah.
to them. Yeah. So basically there was a lot in that podcast, but I wanted us to, sort of just discuss the main points within that podcast itself. I want to hear your thoughts, and maybe there's something the Republicans are not seeing in telling African Americans to shed their racial identity and just adopt an American identity. Maybe that's one of the reasons they're not getting inroads with them. But the first question: why do you think that being Black is so important to African Americans? So why is that so?
Well, oh my goodness. You leapt into the middle of what I'm thinking. I don't think your characterization of what Coleman said was exactly right. Republicans don't see the need. if you're an American, if you identify as American, race doesn't matter. He's not necessarily saying don't be black. It's like you're an American, that supersedes. You can be black and you can be Jewish but American is kind of like the top of the pyramid. I think that the reason being black is important is just like, you hear, and Coleman brought it up. Irish don't identify as white. They identify as, oh, my grandparents were Irish. Um, he made a thing, he brought up a point about ethnicity, which I don't think is correct exactly, but it's in the neighborhood. Um, Black people are proud of their heritage, just like, Italians are proud of, I'm Sicilian. Um, I don't see a problem with that. And if Republicans see, you know, a problem with that, they have a problem. But on top of all that, I mean, black people, even though it's 2023, black people, your great 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 grandfather had it hard. We survived, and when I say we, I mean ancestrally, we survived some pretty damn hard odds. So why would we be ashamed of, surviving a Holocaust, or, maybe a better word? Well, I think slavery was a Holocaust of a different sort. Why would we be ashamed of that heritage? And why would Republicans ask us to be ashamed of that heritage?
Okay, so I, I don't think, from what I understood from Coleman's point, maybe we should lay this background first. So, do African Americans see their race as sort of an ethnicity? Because since they cannot trace their lineage back to, say, a particular tribe or a particular country in Africa, do they see their race as taking the place of
Well,
an ethnicity, just the way an Irish American
actually,
would see himself as not white but Irish, or Italian American would see himself as not white but Italian? So is that the same
I
way
think
African
you
Americans see
can
themselves as black?
actually get close. West African is close, and if you really go back, some of the better genetic tests can be more specific than West African. So you'll never know, um, you know, which village you came from, but um, I'm close enough. I mean, genetic tests have gotten that good.
Yeah, but that's just happened in the couple of just the past a couple of years, and I
Yeah,
doubt if
but
it's that popular.
it's happened.
So, have you done yours? Did you try to check out your lineage, where you're
No.
from? Why?
Um, Now this is going to sound horrible. I'm not that interested. I mean, maybe one of these days I will. Um, and I can trace my heritage back to my father's grandmother and my mother's probably grandmother or beyond that. But my parents are over 80, so I know, um, I don't know details, but oddly enough, um, I'm just not that curious.
Hmm.
Now I know that's weird. Everyone has that kind of curiosity, but
And I don't think
maybe.
it's weird. I think you I suspect that your take represents more of the general African American take. I don't think are they really that interested in finding out specifically where their ancestors were from.
Well, yeah, does it really matter?
It
Now I
doesn't.
know, again, you would think I'd be all into identity politics, but
Well, you don't
um,
strike me as that, not particularly.
It matters. Honestly, it does, but it matters to some people. It doesn't particularly matter to me, and I don't know why. Um, it's just, now and the future are honestly more important. We must know history, but knowing exactly, it, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not going to help. It's not going to fix anything.
Mm. So
And
now
I'm
in
almost
this
ashamed to admit it. It's just not that important to me.
mm, mm. So in terms of racialization of self-racialization, what do you think about Coleman's claim that you know white people don't really see themselves as white; they just see themselves as the ethnicity that their parents are from or their grandparents,
I
since they
think,
can.
I think, whoa, is he wrong?
Mm. So you think they do
And
see
the
themselves
reason
as white?
I think that now, I no, I just think he's flat out wrong. He is, if Christian apologetics, thinking the best of, a person, if that's your thing. But every 4 years, especially in national, presidential politics, I sent you a video of Tommy Tuberville um, last fall in Phoenix, talking about, indirectly he's talking reparations and crime statistics, and the people who are committing the most crime expect reparations. And even you said, well, gee, that's racist. I don't think white people are that unaware of race. And if they aren't, they get reminded every, couple years, every 4 years. So, now it may be a generational thing. I think I would agree that, your average 20-year-old really isn't that, into it. Baby boomers are deep into it because they lived through it. They lived, through Jim Crow, you know, um, the 1960s, etc. So maybe it's going away. Maybe in 50 years, no one will be that much into it, but we don't live in that world yet. So him saying that white people don't think about race, they don't have to, but they
So
know about it.
so you say they don't have to. Isn't that like saying they don't think of themselves as particularly white? They just think of themselves as
Well,
Americans.
not exactly. They don't think about it because white people are 60% of the country, or the demographic currently. If you turn on the TV, maybe not so much in 2023, but you go back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you could turn on the TV and black people were the one black friend. They don't have to think about race because the European beauty standard, Europeanness, WASP, it's the norm. So if they are the norm, anything other than being white is different. Being white is normal. It's what you see on TV. It's your president, for 200 and, 30, 40 years. One black president in 200 and what, 40 years, 30 years. Um, being white is normal. It's being literally American.
Mm. So being white is normal. So do you think that when they say African Americans should,
Well,
you
let
know,
me let me amend that. It's the standard and it is normal.
it's the standard and it's normal?
Yes.
Well, do you have any issues with that being true? If it's the standard and it's the normal, since
Well, it is
they are
literally true. I don't necessarily have a problem. Um, the problem comes in when you, much like maybe Adam got to it, if you're expecting Black people to adopt a white standard or a white viewpoint or a white, basically assimilationist politics, yeah, it becomes a problem then.
Mm. So,
Now, if you can live and let live, um, no, it doesn't have to be a problem. I think that politicians in particular make it a problem.
so it's the politicians who are fanning the flames of these racial tensions. They are the ones that are bringing it to fore. I mean, it's. Are you saying that everyday people don't really mind? Everyone's just living their lives the way they want to, and then the politicians bring it. You know, they bring those racial tensions to stimulate their base, to drive their base to action.
Um, Very good question. I think average, normal, everyday people, we've gotten to a point in 2023 where that's not the first thing you think, oh, he's white or oh, he's black. I don't think that's the first thing you think of. I think it gets stoked, especially with, people my age and older. It gets stoked. I think in 50 years, it may not work, but um, if you don't think about it day to day, you certainly get to thinking about it when Ron DeSantis comes on TV. It says African American studies, certain parts of what they're proposing have no educational value. That's stoking a fire.
But what if it's right?
He's not right. He's
So,
nowhere. He's nowhere near right. No one is forced to take AP courses.
but the point is not about the forcing. The point is that for those who would take those courses, de- definitely for you wanting to take a course, it means that you're seeking more knowledge about that course. What if what's contained
Well,
in
no,
that
you're
course
seeking more
is
knowledge
passing
about the topic of the course.
or about the topic of the course now? So what if what's in that course is wrong, mm, is literally wrong? If it's wrong,
How can seeking knowledge, even if you don't agree with the approach, how can it be wrong? How can knowing, even if you want to go to a point to where I need to know how my opponent thinks, how is that wrong? You don't have to agree with it. You just have to know about it.
yeah,
You have to, and
you
maybe you need to use that knowledge against itself. But I think it's purely anti-educational to just say, oh, hey, certain parts there, this things like CRT 50, 60 years old. These ways of thinking, these ways of knowing, some of the epistemological stuff, it's not like it was invented yesterday. And plenty of people think like this. Plenty of people agree with CRT. Why would you not want to know how it works, even if only to say, hey, y'all are wrong? And here's why. How is knowledge bad?
so I think that you might be able to make that distinction, right? But these are kids. They may not be able to make that distinction that okay, um this is
Just turn
a
it off.
method of analysis. This they may be thinking this is true. This is the way it is. They may be framing America in a certain way that maybe I don't want to use the word wrong, but I'm trying
Well,
to
I know
put it
what
in a
you mean.
certain. I'm trying to make
It,
the
it's not, well, it's not the only way to think about this particular problem. CRT is not like necessarily right. There are other ways to think about race, not just CRT. There are other ways to think about it. I think good teachers will probably bring that up. This is how, this segment of, academia thinks about it. Here's how the other half thinks. You get to choose. And I refuse to
Is
think
that the
that
way it is being framed, that you get to choose, or this is it?
you
Isn't
do
it
get to
taken as
choose.
this is it? This is the way it is.
Well, I'm hoping and it should be that you get to choose.
It should be, but you're not sure.
Oh, I'm
This
a
is
hundred
you.
percent sure.
No, you're hoping. Hope is not like
No,
certainty. You're
you're
not
you're
certain that
listening.
that's
You're
how.
listening. You're listening to Ron DeSantis.
I've never listened to Ron DeSantis. I
What
mean,
what
never.
I'm saying is good teachers will present the dichotomy.
That's
Okay,
assuming that the
a
teachers
teacher's
don't
not going
have
to
an
go
agenda.
in. Mhm.
That's assuming the teachers don't have an agenda. When they do
No,
have an agenda, they're not going to present the facts.
most
Um,
teachers do not.
Stanley, Stanley. That's certainly not
Dude,
true. It's not
I,
true that most
I
teachers don't
I
have an agenda.
come. My mother's a retired teacher. My sister's a retired teacher. I've known plenty of teachers. No, they
Yeah,
do not.
and now we're
They
talking
do
about
not
teachers.
have an agenda.
We're talking about contemporary teachers. We're not talking about teachers of yesteryears. I
Well, my
mean,
son is in school. He's 16. I've met his teachers. I've never gotten the impression that they want, my son to be a certain way. And he's taken AP World History. He's taken these AP courses. And you know what? Quite frankly, if he came home and said, "Well, my teacher says that it is this way," you know what? As a parent, I might just go, "Well, here's how it really is." Parents have a I don't think parents should just go, "No, you can't learn about this." I think parents need to engage with their children. They need to engage with the teachers. I mean, too many American parents do not engage with their teachers or their kids' teachers. I've had meetings with my son's guidance counselor because I want his educational outcome to come out the way me as a parent thinks it ought to be. And, I think sometimes that parents will go, "Oh, teachers have an agenda." Well, if they have an agenda, what are you doing to counter it? How are you interacting with your kids to go, "Hey, kid, this is what the teacher says, but this is how it works in the real world." It's easy to counteract something that you think isn't being taught right. And, up to and including going to a school board meeting and, raising a ruckus. But I think the best way to counteract it is to know what your kids are learning and be involved in their school. And
and
if you are
Melinda is
not
asking,
involved
why
in
not
your kid,
homeschool?
I'm sorry,
Why not homeschool instead?
I think
Why do
that's
you
a
have to
great
go through the
alternative.
trouble?
I have no problems with that. However, um, I've met some of these people who want to homeschool their kids, and I'm like, okay, you know,
You think they're not?
it's
You
your
think they're
right,
not up to it?
it's your right as a parent, but um, I'm just glad I'm not your kid.
Okay, so
Your kid will be okay.
let's talk about something like Black History Month, right? So Adam made some comments about Black History Month and how it was actually started by Republicans, and how it started first off as a Black History Week, and it was
Yes,
then expanded
Carter
to
G.
the
Woodson.
Black. Black History Month. In the month of February, as in honor of, I think Abraham Lincoln was born in the month of February or something like that.
Yeah,
So
something
he
like the
was saying,
19th, something like that.
yeah, so he was saying that even Republicans that are taking issues with Black History Month today have forgotten their own history, forgotten that it was Republicans who started the Black History Month, and now they're just up in arms on anything that has black in it. What do you say
Okay.
about that?
Well, it might have been started by Republicans, and certainly Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, but I think Adam Coleman knows better. Um, Republicans in 2023 are not the Republicans of 1865. If Frederick Douglass were alive today, he wouldn't be a Republican.
But it's the same thing we're saying. The Republicans of today have forgotten their history. It's the
No,
same thing he said.
he has forgotten Republican history because there were two shifts. There was a shift from black voters to Democrat in the 1930s, mostly because they were for Roosevelt. And then there was a major shift. I guess it was in the late 60s, round about 70, after Goldwater lost, where Dixiecrats, who were Southern Democrats, who were for segregation, George Wallace, Strom Thurmond, folks of that ilk, they basically jumped the Democratic ship because Johnson was for civil rights and they weren't. And, I don't remember the exact details, but he's not quite. Republicans, even in the 50s and 60s, are not the same Republicans that we know of and vote for, some of us, in 1965. I'm sorry, in 2023. He's not getting it right. And sometimes, and I know this is going to be a little incendiary, but I think conservatives depend on the people they're talking to not knowing their history. And I think Republicans specifically depend on their constituents being too busy to actually go and suss out some of this stuff. What he's saying about Republicans not knowing their history, he doesn't know Republican history. And yep, I said it.
No, but you said the Republicans of the 30s are different from the Republicans of today, and the Republicans of the
I
30s are
would
different from the
say
Republicans at the time of Abraham Lincoln. So,
The Republicans of today are different than 19th century Republicans. The Republican Party was pretty staunchly anti-slavery.
mm-hmm,
Now, anti-slavery doesn't mean anti-racist. They're two different things,
mm,
and that's easily, like, you can go to history books. Abraham Lincoln himself, he wasn't really that much into slavery, though at the very beginning, before his presidency and during his first term, his thing was, I will saving the Union was his goal. And he literally says something like, if I can preserve the Union by keeping slavery, I'll do it. If I have to get rid of slavery to preserve the Union, I'll do it. So he wasn't necessarily anti-racist. He got better after he met Douglas, and it just became something that it was just the right thing to do. But you also have to understand that Haiti and the island was what was it, Dominica? I can't remember the name of it, but the island that the Dominican Republic and Haiti exists on. Um, America attempted to colonize it. There are a lot of American, well, ADOS, they did an experimental colony into what is now the Dominican Republic. And then Douglas actually, he wasn't exactly an ambassador, but you know, Douglas went to Haiti to kind of scope it to see if it would be a good place for descendants of slaves or former slaves to go to live. There was a whole movement, and these were anti-slavery people who were like, blacks and whites can't live together. It's as much for the protection of the blacks for them to move away because the whites are too racist to accept them. That's a whole, little segment of, and they were anti-slavery, they weren't anti-racist. And that's the Republican Party. What he's saying about the Republicans today, Tucker Carlson is not, emblematic of the Republican Party, of post Civil War. It is totally different. The racists went from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party because Johnson, as a Democrat, proposed civil rights.
But I still don't get how the Republicans can be the party of the anti-slavery party and still be a racist party. It's is a
Just
massive
because,
contradiction to me.
well, it's actually not. Well, think about it. Um, Slavery is wrong, but the deeper thing was blacks and whites. You can be anti-slavery, but still think blacks are not equal to whites. I mean, that happens today. I mean, now I'm being crude about this, but people like Charles Murray don't think blacks today are equal to whites. And
Well,
he uses IQ tests to prove it. Now,
mm,
he does say that there are exceptions. You have to judge everybody individually, but as a mean, black people score, what is it? They don't score as well on things like SATs and IQ tests. He does not think your average black person is equal, at least IQ wise, to a white person. And he
but
depends on statistics, etc. He may have his evidence. However, it amounts to him not thinking that black people are as mentally capable on average as white people.
okay, so
It-
I don't get, even if it's true that IQ wise, quote unquote, the races are different. I don't see how that translates into superiority and inferiority because the sum total and the worth of an individual is not just on their IQ. It's not
right.
dependent on their IQ.
And
So
Charles Murray,
even if you can prove that that were the case, it doesn't compare superiority to any race or inferiority to any race.
Charles Murray is very specific in bringing up your point. You are right. Charles Murray makes that distinction. However, Charles Murray's work has given, fodder to a person like Amy Wax, who has literally said, I think it was Louis Razo Bravo
Bravo.
he was talking to, where she said, and this is like something from like the 1930s, where black people need to wait their turn. They're not ready to be neurosurgeons or, Amy Wax literally says this. And
Mm,
she is like an Ivy League law professor. She's not the only one thinking this, and I don't think she's an aberration.
mm.
And frankly, well, I won't go there. If Amy Wax is thinking this, she's not unique or an outlier. There are people who think that Black people, as a whole, of course, they're Glenn Lowry's, of course, they're Charles's, who are just exceptional. It wouldn't matter. But there are people who think that as a whole, Black people, ADOS as a community, are not in the same place as the white community, and we need another 100 years to get, you know, we need to get rid of single parent homes, and we need to stop teasing, kids for acting white. There's a whole litany of things that Black people need to do to get their quote act together. And
But
funny, there are people like Glenn and John who pretty much buy into that, and
okay,
Tom
now
and
so
Paul.
so what you're saying right now really doesn't even tie into genetics. If that's what they're saying about black people, that you need
Well,
to get
no,
your
it
acts
doesn't
together.
tie into genetics at all.
So that could literally be true. That could actually be
However,
true.
the basis of Charles Murray's argument is genetics. He literally talks about the heritability of IQ.
But IQ has to be heritable. Where will it come from in the
Okay,
first place?
so what does heritable mean? How do traits get inherited from parents to kids? Genetics.
Mm-hmm,
So it is a genetic argument.
mm-hmm.
So you just said it is. You said you don't see how it's genetic. Go back to Charles Murray. He's the
So
one who brings up genetics.
I think, of course, I think it's genetic because we are a sum total of our genetics and our environment, right? So now, where I will have an issue with Charles Murray's stance on the heritability is if he says that there is something inferior in African genes that is being passed down to African descendants that's just making them at that point. But if he's saying that, well, the IQ has to come from, you have to inherit it from your parents, there's an interaction with the environment, and these things can produce what they produce, right?
Right.
That's not a problem for me.
Right. Well, um, it's a problem for me until he can actually prove it.
So now let's
He's
let's
been able
get to
he's been able to do it statistically, but statistics can do whatever you want them to do. Okay, and things like IQ tests, those are kind of artificial. There's no way for an IQ test not to be artificial.
Mm.
Um, they're just there. There's a lot of uncertainty behind Charles Murray's argument. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence to prove him right. There's a lot of, just day to day, like, hey, smart parents, smart kids, but there are also plenty of exceptions to that. And the bottom line is we have not been able to prove, and when I say we, I mean scientists, we haven't been able to prove Murray right or wrong.
mm. Okay,
And
so
to build a public policy, which was really his goal in the first place, but to build a public policy on something that you suspect, to build a policy even on statistics, that's not a solid foundation. And on top of that, there's poverty involved. There are just a bunch of things that, Charles Murray might be right, but it's a coin toss at this point.
yeah. So my biggest gripe with Charles Murray. It's not his data or even his interpretation of the data. I think my biggest gripe with Charles Murray is why exactly he started the study in the first place, what he's trying to prove.
Oh, oh.
That's yeah. So he's
You know who his
he's
co-author was, right? For the bell curve? It
was
was what was
was the
his
other guy's name?
Bernstein.
Yeah,
Now, Herrnstein was a Harvard psychologist. If you go back and look, William F. Buckley did a firing line with Herrnstein and a Columbia uh, psychologist. Herrnstein actually believed more so, I think, than Murray, easily more so than Murray. Herrnstein was a hardcore. There are racial differences, between blacks and whites. The problem is, if you look at ADOS, quite a like 20, what's the number? Like there's like a huge number of ADOS that have European heritage. So
but
there's some
but
there's some problems with Murray's
but
argument
Stanley, I can also counter that argument and say, okay,
or
yeah, so
counter it.
20% of ADOS have European ancestry. So what? It's 20%. I
It's
mean,
more than no, 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 no.
80% is
It's
still
not
African ancestry.
20%. It's a higher number than that. A high percentage
But it's not a hundred
of
percent.
ADOS have at least a quarter of their genetics that are European. So there are a bunch of ADOS walking around where 25% of their genetics are European.
It's still not a hundred
So how
percent.
do you call them black? Is my point. Are they
It's
black
still
or
it's
are
still
they
it's
European? Are they mixed
well
race?
well that's part of the question we're asking. But African
Well,
Americans
my
identify more with the
my
black side than with the
answer
European side. So
my answer is even dark skinned, ADOS, more than likely they're going to have European heritage. So how do you really categorize them racially and say that a whole population who is black, are they really black?
my point is this, Stanley. Let's say for purposes of argument, we say the average European IQ is 120. The average African IQ is 80. This is just for the purposes of argument. If you have mixed race kids between Africans and Europeans, right? Would their IQ be as much as the Europeans who are okay? See, 100% both parents are Europeans, and someone who has a European parent and an African parent. If you want to look at it, say on a statistical level, this is not
Okay.
me saying that's what it is. I'm just saying for the purposes of
Okay. Well,
argument, right?
let me go back to the very beginning. Is that mixed race kid white or black? That's
They are mixed race.
okay.
They're both.
You're not listening to my question. If they're mixed race, they're not
Mhm,
black or white.
mhm.
So how do you really categorize someone who's in between? You can't. At least
You
not at least not in good faith.
well. So
I mean,
now
literally a 50% a half black person and a half white person. Are they white? Are they black? Are they mixed? I've not heard Charles Murray talk about the statistics for mixed race people.
mm,
So there's a
well,
third category.
I I think he literally has because many African Americans are mixed race. So if
I
he's
think
talking
he
about
has not.
the black white IQ gap in the US, is obviously referring to African Americans as the black group, and
And my
and
question
European
is
descendant
just
whites as the
because
whites.
some just because someone has dark skin doesn't necessarily mean they're 100% black.
Exactly.
There's a
That's what
lot.
we're
There's a
saying.
lot of rhetorical gray. Okay, and I do not find Charles Murray very
That's
effective.
so
He wants
what
to
I'm saying.
categorize race by IQ, and race is not that easy to define in the
v-
US.
Exactly. So that's my point. That's another
Therefore, his
point.
argument is invalid. He can't do it by race.
Mm. All right. So let's welcome Steve to the conversation. Steve, welcome to the conversation. We've been waiting
Hey,
for you.
Steve.
So jump right in.
Yeah, sorry I was late and I'm not feeling great and I was taking a nap.
How are you doing
Um,
now? How are you feeling now?
I'm still feeling like shit. Um,
Please get better.
but I, 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 I think there's a vastly, I take a vastly different perspective to this, which is, I mean, so what if someone has 20% and 80%? Like that doesn't really factor for me. Like, okay, I can see that your skin is darker, sure, but that does not, I'm not going to conflate that with intelligence or anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what
What if,
if
what if, what?
there is a hereditary component to that people with certain skin tones have certain inheritances. This is a
I,
what if. Stanley is shaking his head, but
Are,
this
are
is a what if.
Are Italians
We
less
need to be able to
intelligent
ask the
than
hard
Northern
questions, right?
Europeans?
let Charles finish.
So what if, like I give okay, let's use Italians and Germans, right? Let's say the Germanic people and the Romance people, that there is a difference between their IQs that is hereditary. You can trace it to hereditary. Let's say the Italians have um more than average IQ or a greater IQ than the Germanic people, right?
Okay.
Yes, you can say, oh, looking at their skin, it doesn't tell you anything. But if there is an hereditary component to a certain characteristic for both groups, I'm not saying that's the sum total of those individuals, right? But what if that is the case? Can't it be said that this is what it is? We're not passing judgment. We're not saying as a result of this group is inferior, right? For example, I mean, there are always different categories. There are always different categories there. Male and female is a category that have their own unique features as well. It doesn't mean one is superior and the other is inferior. It just shows that there are differences, right? So I think we shouldn't shy away from talking about these differences, right? If these differences are proven to be okay, this is true.
Okay, we need to prove that there are differences. And so far, it's not been done. And one thing you brought up about intelligence being dependent on skin pigmentation, that's a pretty simple test. If darker people are less intelligent than lighter people, where's the evidence? And where I haven't, he's doing white and black, but they're black people who are paler than some white people.
Okay,
Well,
so
I think you have a statistical pool problem too here. It's like, okay, well, first of all, who's getting tested? Like fundamentally, who's getting tested? Are you pulling random samples from society and testing random samples, or are you pulling from a certain demographic of those samples? Like, I don't understand what the point of trying to be concerned about this is because in the end, these could very well possibly be cultural issues. Like, for example, the Chinese have a really good handle on math because of the structure of their language, the way that it's written. Like these things do actually play into human intellectual pursuits, but it's just to say that just because we're testing for one type of intelligence doesn't mean that they don't have a completely different set of intelligence that is just not measurable yet. So I don't really follow the line here.
Well, let me. There's a video, and I guess I'd have to go look for it. But there's a video I saw maybe 3 years ago of Murray talking to someone. I think it might have been an AEI. He used to work for American Enterprise Institute, and he talks about how he came to this whole how he came to the bell curve, or wanting to write the bell curve. And his thing was, there were people in the 70s, for instance, that were saying that Black people after the civil rights movement were not doing well because America is a racist country. And people still say that. Well, he could not believe that. He does not think that America is a racist country. So he says there must be another reason that Black people aren't doing well. So that was the genesis of, his whole, like, looking for reasons why Black people aren't doing well.
Yeah,
And you have to understand that, he's not a geneticist, he's a policy expert.
so I think that's like I said earlier, that's my biggest gripe with Murray, right? Trying to counter quote unquote systemic racism with just an utterly despicable, it's if it was just for scientific inquiry and it just happened, his findings just happened to be what they are, I think it would make more sense. But him trying to prove that the reason why African Americans are not doing that good is because it's not because America is racist, but just because they're not just smart enough. That's the way I see it. It boils down to him saying that they're not just smart enough. That's why they're not getting ahead. He's either deliberately ignoring the history, which I think you can't just wish away. Even if the country is not racist today, you cannot tell me that the impact of what had been done in the past doesn't have any effect on the people for
Excuse
today.
me,
I mean, say in the 60s, when was the Civil Rights Act passed? It was passed in the 60s. So was
before.
he 64? Was he
Oh, and
actually
by the way, just a quick aside,
Mhm.
1964 wasn't the first time a Civil Rights Act was passed. There were a couple others, one shortly after the Civil War, and I forget when the second one was.
so
Early
was
So
the
1900s, if I remember.
the third time was a charm.
so did he really think that for people who had been oppressed for so long that they would just magically be up to speed with the rest of the population? I don't think that was reasonable to expect. So his whole shtick was, I think it was on shaky foundation, really
Well,
really shaky foundation for me.
can I add something?
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
the IQ debate is one that I've always had a real sketchy grasp of, in the sense that IQ does not predict success. It never has. It predicts success only if you're in a career field that requires high IQ. But the vast
Well,
majority of
statistically,
the
it does.
vast majority of jobs do not require a high IQ.
Right, but statistically, IQ does predict success.
Not really.
It does.
Not in studies that
Believe it
I've
or
read.
not.
Because you can have a massively
Really,
high IQ and do nothing with it, and that's something that a lot of people
well,
actually end up
that
doing.
the majority of people with high IQs do something with it.
Well, no, they don't. So if you take an
I'll send
MBA,
you.
or if you
I'll
take
send you. I'll
CEOs,
send you the
you will
numbers.
find a correlation with high IQ, because that's required for that position. But if you take a statistical look at people with high IQs, you will not find that same correlation.
Yes, you will.
Steve, you're a bit
I
choppy.
will find the data.
You're a bit choppy
I'll
in
find it for you and send it. I mean, that's the one thing Murray gets right. People with high IQs statistically do better.
So for me, I think I hate single courses narratives, right? Where people just say, "Oh, it is this particular thing that's responsible for this pathology." It blows my mind. Life is much more nuanced than that, right? So you can't just pick out one issue and say, "Oh, this is why this thing is happening." if you're not giving me a round 360 view of the cause of the problem, I'm just going to dismiss you as someone who is not serious. So that's why I have issues with things like this. You know, you have to look at it from many angles and come up with a synthesis and say, well, this and this and this contributed to why you have this situation. And then I think you're a much more serious person.
I agree with that point, and I think Murray took the easy way out. And he took the easy way out because the majority of, you know, America would buy that argument. It's almost a traditional argument.
Steve, Steve, I think you're muted, Steve. Can't hear you. Okay.
Yeah, busy.
So,
What's up?
oh, you were busy. Okay, fine. I thought you wanted to
No,
jump
there's
in
an
there.
article. There's an article from Yale University that actually discusses high IQ and success, and it's only predictable in high IQ required jobs like physicists, mathematics. But in any other daytime job, high IQ does nothing to give you a benefit. Like even in the career field I'm going into, high IQ means nothing.
Okay, well, you're
It's not a predictor of
misunderstanding my
success.
point. If you look across occupations, and maybe it depends on what you define as success. I mean, you know, I tend to talk to a lot of anons, and success is economics. So, and now I can't wait to have to hear Anon fuss at me about that comment. But if you're measuring success as, economic success, people with higher IQs do better. So I should have qualified my point. And we're not looking, we're looking across the board at occupations.
Well, yeah, and it goes something like this. Height plays a role in being a basketball player, but it's not the only role that is played in basketball, right? You
Right,
have to have skill, you have to have dribbling capabilities, you have to have all these other things. So
right.
merely just having height itself is not a predictor of success, but it is a component of the success.
Right.
It's the same thing with
But
IQ.
let's look at it from the flip side. The more successful basketball players have height.
Well, all of them have height, but
Okay.
that's a
What I'm,
correlation, not a
what I'm
causation.
saying, the more successful people have height. You're not going to get many Muggsy Bogues.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get across here is that if you look at careers that require high IQ, you're only going to have people with high IQ in those positions, so it skews the data pool.
Again, look at it from the opposite side. Across the board, people with high IQs tend statistically to be more economically successful
Right, but we're talking about predictors,
because they're going to go for jobs that are high paying.
and usually those high paying jobs require a fairly high IQ.
Right. And they
Right.
tend to pay more than flipping burgers. Therefore, economically, those high IQ people, there might be fewer of them, and there are few of them. They're going to do better financially than a person doing, neurosurgery as a career is going to do better than someone working, as a burger flipper for 30 years.
Mm. Maury got us disagreeing. Maury
So
got us disagreeing.
if you're taking into account, and this is partially what was in the bell curve too, is like 68% of Americans are within the average IQ range, but there's a shit ton of average IQ people, and they're still very smart. There's only
Right.
13 or 14% of people that are above average, and only 2.2% of the population is exceptional. So when you're looking at IQ, it has no predictability. Like, it depends on what career field that the person wants to go into. You could be like me, who's above average. But I mean, for 28 years, I was a mechanic. Like, that requires very little IQ and more skill and ability in remembering, which I
Well,
was already a deficiency
so
at. But
being able to remember stuff isn't indicative of IQ.
no, no, it's
Okay.
not. It's interpretation of the data that is what predicts IQ. So I have to be able to take.
Interesting.
I can remember where a bolt goes. That's not IQ. That's just memory. You have to. The difference in IQ is the ability to remember something, withdraw that information easily, and interpret that information. That's
I
IQ.
think I think people with above average IQ have better memories.
It's possible. Sometimes they're extremely forgetful.
Uh,
I mean,
I
look
don't
at
know,
Okay,
but
Einstein and
stop
look at his desk
stop
as a
being
fucking mess.
modest.
so now let's look at the Jewish case. Now, Jewish people have, you know, I've seen some, I've seen some cases where it is shown that Jewish people have, on the average, high IQs, especially linguistically. In terms of linguistic IQ, the Jewish people usually rate very high in that. And you can see almost the correlation between that and Jewish success in so many areas. There's so many people that once you just look at them, I'll be like, this person has to have a Jewish ancestry, has a Jewish root. So in that sense, isn't it correct that IQ somehow correlates with, a high IQ somehow correlates with, you know, life outcomes, better life outcomes? I mean, the Jewish case has proven that.
I don't know. I just
Steve,
think
you're muted. You're muted,
I'm
Steve.
sorry.
Sorry. So in the Jewish religion, there's also other factors that go along here. Like, it's actually a sin to God if you do not do your absolute best in everything that you do. So it's going to be naturally and culturally, I should say, it's going to be culturally natural for these people to excel at everything they do. Because if your premise is that if I don't do the very best I can, that I sin in front of God, you are going to be highly motivated to do the very best that you can. And the crappy thing about the group of Jews that have the highest IQ are the Ashkenazi Jews, who also are predicated to Alzheimer's disease. So not only are they the smartest out of that demographic, but they also suffer from mental health illness at disproportionate rates to everybody else. There's more cases of Alzheimer's per capita in the Ashkenazi Jew community than there are anywhere else.
So what's
So
your point?
my point is that even if you take a group of people who could be intelligent, hyper intelligent, I would say at this point, there's still other factors that are going on there. You have cultural influences, you have family influences, you have religious influences. I think IQ is one of those correlations, but it's not predictive.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Now, this is totally anecdotal. You know, my son, for instance, I remember, and I think I told one of you this story. When he was in seventh grade, he actually he got like a couple C's, and some being a typical seventh grader. And he said to me, "Well, a C is a passing grade." I I started laughing. I'm like, no, I'll accept B's. A is your passing grade. And I know you, kid. You're sloughing off. And after had to do a couple rounds of that, but you know what? He's done fine ever since. So I just think that culture and I think parents, I think parents are the X factor. My son's not super smart. As a matter of fact, the older he gets, the less smart I think he is.
No, no, maybe this is just the adolescent phase. It's not really
But
him. Not it.
but the
It's
bottom line is, I think you have to. Parents are, the one thing I adamantly agree with conservatives on. Family is everything.
Mm.
And
so
As a
not
matter of
just because, we want, to rock the baby to sleep. Family sets expectations, not school, not Governor DeSantis, family.
yeah.
so
Well,
uh,
having an active father, an active role model.
I'm a single parent, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, having an active father in the child's life is a massively greater predictor of success than IQ.
Well, having
Massively bigger.
a good father.
That's what I'm saying. An emotionally available father who interacts with their children, that is a bigger predictor than IQ, like hands down, like by a massive, massive margin.
Not going to disagree.
so my next question would be: it seems as though IQ is malleable then by cultural factors, right? So if for whatever IQ you've inherited, if you've grown up in a culture that encourages certain things, you're certainly going to come up with a better than average IQ, or a better IQ than someone with the same inheritances, right? And that grew up in another culture or in another environment, or gone in another family. I to me, I think this is just it's more like muscle memory, right? When you practice something, you become good at it, right? Some people are more adept at it naturally, but if you are adept at something and you don't even practice, you're not going to be good at it, right? So that's what I think. I think it's malleable. I don't think it's fixed. I think there are lots of factors that even contribute to IQ itself. So it's not just a blank slate. Oh, this is your IQ. It's 180, it's 20, it's this, and that's it. No, no, no. I don't think
Well,
that's
the
the case.
the interesting thing, and I actually haven't thought about it in a while, but you know, the Flynn effect, which is like, as since say the early 20th century, every decade or so, IQs go up, and that's for students of all racial backgrounds. So obviously, IQ is somewhat fluid if it keeps going up. I mean, kids today know more stuff than kids in 1750.
My daughter is a year and some months old, and she can already navigate a phone. I mean, she can take my
So
phone, go pull up a video she wants to watch,
yeah,
or pull up a picture she wants to see. She can navigate the phone.
Mhm.
I'm
so,
blown
so
away.
the actual number, Stanley, is every 10 years on average, the IQ for everybody goes up by 3%. So they
Okay,
actually have to rewrite IQ tests every decade to
right.
account for that.
And see, that's the weird thing. I mean, something that fluid, can you really pin public policy on it?
No, I wouldn't, because there's other things that intersect with that, which is like interest.
Yep.
Interest is a huge thing. Like, what are you actually interested in doing? You could have a really high IQ, but like not give a shit and want to turn wrenches for a living because it's easy. Like you don't
Well,
want something
not
that's
only
active in
that,
your mind.
maybe it just, I wouldn't say easy. I just say it's what floats your boat.
Well, I mean, I'm just making an example here because my job, after about 10 years, it's not difficult. The first 10 years is pretty tough on you. But after 10 years, I could do my job asleep, drunk, whatever, because I know I've done
Well,
it.
let me prove to you your high IQ. You're going to get a more complicated job.
I am, yeah, but
That's
it's
that's
still
that's not low IQ, sir.
the field that I'm going into is
That
is
that's an IQ going, this is getting too easy. Let's go out and find something a little bit more challenging. What is that
Actually,
if not IQ? And
actually, no.
it speaks to your point.
It was people like you and Charles, Dr. Mason,
Right.
and Odier, and everybody else that was like, "Hey, we're going to talk about all these really smart things," and you're like, all of a sudden, you're understanding them, and
Dude,
then you're like, "Well, shit! If I can apply this to my daily life, maybe I can go do something better." And so you say, "Hey, I'm going to go to school," and then you find out, "Holy shit, this is way easier than I thought it was," and then you do that
Aristotle
thing.
Aristotle didn't get you that job.
No, no. But I'll tell you what, like in the last year, my like year and a half, 2 years, ever since I've been doing this kind of stuff and doing stuff with you guys, my life has dramatically changed. I went to school, I got published multiple times, I became a contributing writer, I did other stuff and other stuff and other stuff. And I think it's just like when you're in that right environment, it becomes a positive petri dish. Like what can I do now? You know what I mean? So I think it has there's a social influence there that also work in tandem with cultural and family ties. Because I never would have put two thoughts to going back to school until I started talking to Dr. Mason and Charles and you. Like it would never even entered my mind. So I think that has a lot to do with it too.
How is Dr. Mason doing? I haven't
She's
talked to
doing
her
really
in a
well.
while.
Yeah, she's really busy.
Good for her.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, where do we go from here?
Hold
I
on one sec. Go ahead, Charles.
How much did you
so
cover from Adam's video? Because he had really interesting points.
yeah. So, Steve, can you bring up
Uh,
some of those points because we didn't really talk so much about those points. So maybe you can outline a few of those points, then we can talk about it.
Well, yeah, sure. One of the points that he was talking about was that one of the biggest mistakes that conservatives make is that they say, "Hey, you throw away your race, use instead nationality, right? Use national pride or whatever you want to call it." And this is one of the biggest flaws that conservatives suffer from is that they suffer from the problem of colorblindness, which is I see your race, but I choose to ignore it, right? And by doing that, you ignore all the racism that comes with that, with the implications of race. And also on top of that, you have people that perhaps the color of their skin really does play a large role in their lives. And so conservatives are losing that demographic because they are not acknowledging the way that race intersects in people's lives. I think that was Adam's biggest complaint was that conservatives don't do that and Democrats do it way too much to the point where they actually are very almost gatekeepy about it. Like Biden's comment, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, which is incredibly racist in my view. But
yes, I have a response to that.
so
Uh,
that
Go
was the
ahead.
biggest overarching scheme that I saw with what Adam was talking about. And I think
Yeah.
in some
and
degrees,
I
I think he's
think
very right.
my first question is which country is he living in? Okay, most Republicans, and I won't rehash what I said earlier, but if you're ranking, I would agree with like normal white people, etc. And maybe it is the politicians, but the first time I actually kind of became aware of it was Lee Atwater. Okay, Republicans don't get black votes because they depend on racist tropes like what Tommy Tuberville did last October or August or whenever it was. They trot out the Willie Hortons. They don't try to build bridges. They separate and use racial fear, dog whistles, as part of their campaign strategy. It's not because white people don't understand what race is. It's because they do understand what race is, and every 4 years, they're voting for their race. They're not being inclusive. And I'm not going to go, farther than I need to, but I think I I'm just wondering where Adam Coleman is coming from with this. There's ample evidence that Republicans use race as a plank in their campaigns platforms.
Well, is it the absence of race or race itself?
No, it's literally they are racists.
Hmm.
Stanley,
I don't agree with that.
that's
Trump
very
is
that's a very
Trump,
strong
a
claim.
former American president, was a racist.
I don't see him as racist.
Dude, go back. I've sent you, like, dude has convictions for being a slumlord. The Mexican thing, that's pretty racist.
No, it's
I can
not.
send you a list
I
of
sent
things he's
you
done that are very
Tommy
That
racist.
that
Tuber,
that may be
Tommy
xenophobic,
Tuberville's
but that's
speech.
not racist.
Dude, Charles, you said Tommy Tuberville was being a racist. Do you recall?
Refresh my memory.
He's the dude in who gave the speech. I think it was for what's her name in Phoenix, where he's talking about reparations. These people who are committing a bunch of crime want reparations. Well, there's only one people that talk about reparations a lot, and it's not Polish people. That
Well,
that was dog whistles. And Charles, you yourself literally used it's racist. Republicans are not colorblind. At least they're not every 4 years. And
Well,
um,
I just think
they
you can't just pigeonhole
yes,
Republicans
I
in
can.
general.
I can. I will make generalities because I have ample evidence to back up my argument. Overflowing evidence.
okay, so Stanley, I think that maybe you are seeing it as I don't like this thing he said about these people, about black people, and you're interpreting it
Who?
as racism.
Uh,
Trump. Let's go
okay.
to Trump.
Well,
Let's
hold
go to
on
Trump.
one sec.
Let's go to Trump.
You're gonna
Let's go to
do
Trump.
it, dude.
Now, is
If
it
I don't,
possible?
if I
Is it
think
possible? Is it possible to say something about a group, right? Something that's negative about a group without it being racist? If you are
if
referring to someone of another,
if the negative connotations have been happening for 400 years, you know what? I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. America has a tradition. It was built on racism. No, I'm not Adam Coleman. No, I'm not going to give the benefit of the doubt.
Steve.
Yeah.
And most black people won't. That's why we're not voting Republican.
Well, Adam did bring up a point that
400 years
Republicans
of
Republicans don't even try to reach out to black voters. I mean, it's like they've sort of given up their hands off. They
no.
don't campaign in districts where there are a lot of black people,
This
and
Yeah,
that's
this
they just
part of the
completely
victim
reason.
ignore those.
this victim complex of we're going to give up because they won't vote for us anyway. That is a canard.
But is
We
that
can't
not what's
we
happening?
can't we can't give up our racism to attract voters. Is what they should be saying. Tucker Carlson, Tucker Carlson replacement theory? What on earth is that but racism? The biggest cable show talks about replacement theory.
Yeah, but he wasn't talking about black
Oh,
people. He
Oh
wasn't
no,
talking
he
about black
wasn't
people.
talking about black people.
Wait,
Who
he
the hell
wasn't
do you
talking.
think was good?
Wait, he wasn't talking about black people replacing Americans, right?
Okay, so he
He was
was
talking about
talking about.
foreigners.
Well, hold on. Interesting point. He wasn't talking about black people. Who was he talking about?
He was talking about foreigners.
He was talking about um, people coming across the southern border.
So who's coming across the southern border? Are they blacks?
Okay, so what you're telling me is if if someone is being racist a
No,
non to a
that's
non-black population,
that's
blacks shouldn't care.
xenophobia. That's
Maybe blacks
xenophobia.
just don't like racists of
No,
any
that's
sort.
it. See, this we have this problem in Africa too. For example, Nigerians get attacked a lot in South Africa because they think Nigerians are coming to take all their businesses and take all their women and all that. That's xenophobia. It's not racism. It's just a fear of outsiders, a fear of. I don't see it
You,
as racism.
such a
I
good
don't.
point. Such a good point. That's why I didn't bring up South Africa. It's a different dynamic. And I keep trying to tell Ogie this. South
I
Africa has a different dynamic. And I
but
think
they're
you,
still a country. They're still a country. They are
but,
suspicious of
but
foreigners, just
you,
as Tucker Carlson is suspicious of foreigners. You can't
you
just jump
correctly,
straight to,
you
oh, it's racism.
correctly,
No,
um,
it's xenophobia. It's not
good.
racism.
That's what South Africa is doing. I say
Yep,
America is big.
that's what Tucker is doing.
You can be xenophobic and racist. You do
Yeah,
know
true, true,
they mix well,
true. It's possible. It's possible.
and that's what America is. I mean, and hell, America's racist. So what? It doesn't have to be an impediment. It can be a speed bump. It is a curable disease. How about let's stop, much like John Roberts says, and I find some huge problems with his statement, but the only way to not be racist is to stop being racist. America can't seem to follow John Roberts' advice.
Well, I usually like reserving judgment until I have enough evidence to prove a certain
Right.
thing.
Well,
I
all I have
Well,
to say is I have lived 57 years, most of it in the South. I have all, you know what? Sometimes after 57 years, you kind of know where you live. I have the advantage of,
so Latino groups, demographic groups, Mexican Americans overwhelmingly voted Republican last year.
I'm sorry, what?
So Latino voters strongly voted Republican last year.
Let's put that into context. Did the majority vote for Republicans, or did the number that voted Republican increase sharply? There's a difference.
I'm not sure. I know that
Okay. The majority of
let me hold on.
Latinos did not vote Republican. Using overwhelming is a bit of a stretch because there are more
It
black
might be.
people that voted Republican. Would you say that blacks overwhelmingly voted?
No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong, Stanley. I'm wrong. The only place where Latinos actually voted strongly Republican was in Florida. Everywhere else, they vote Democratic.
And that demographic is mostly Cuban, if I recall. Maybe
so
Venezuelans
Cubans.
too, but
So
um,
what's up with
go ahead, John.
the Cubans? What's up with the Cubans? Why are they voting Republican? I mean,
Culturally
are
very
they
different. They're very
are they
conservative.
are they white? Are they white?
A
Cubans
lot
are
of
white.
them.
I have no idea.
Well, I'm not gonna. They tend to most of the Cubans that moved here, say in the 50s and 60s, were the richer strata. They tended to be more conservative, and they tended to be more European.
Yeah, they're
Okay, so
Orthodox Catholic, if I remember correctly.
Right. Yep.
so to me, the wealth doesn't matter to me. Their conservative belief doesn't matter to me. What matters to me now is, are they white? Because that
Okay.
seems to be the that's if because if you are saying they're voting conservative because they've always been conservative, or they're voting conservative because they're rich, then it doesn't bring in the racial element. For you to prove that the Republicans are not
I don't have to
attracting
prove
other
it.
people. No, no, let me finish.
They
For you
tend
for
to
you to
be.
make the claim, for you to
They
make the
tend.
claim, for that claim to be valid, that Republicans are not attracting other people aside white people, then you have to be able to explain that the Cubans, right, are predominantly white. That's why they are voting Republican.
Okay. Now
If not, why are they?
the thing you have to understand about Cubans is they are not WASPs. They have European heritage. They tend to be whiter, but they would call themselves Cubans.
It's just the
And
degree.
then the
Whiter
other
doesn't mean they are
interesting
white.
thing is Latinos as a group tend to identify as white. Census,
Well,
that sort of thing.
Oh, so they tend to identify as white. Yet the Latinos coming from the southern border, uh, Tucker is racist against them, right?
They tend, if you look at California, Mexico kind of has the same thing. I mean, there's a more Euro population versus a more African heritage population. The one thing, and I'm nowhere near, very good with it. There was African slavery in South and Central America, and there are populations that are more
No,
European than
no,
African.
but the other big population there would be the admixture with the native population, so the mestizos, as they would call them.
The Europeans tended to stay European.
Yeah, but there was also a mix. That's why the Mexicans have the typical
Um,
Mexican look.
I there wasn't that much of a mix.
it sounds like we're kind of conflating culture with race again, in
Could
my
be.
opinion.
I won't doubt that. Cubans tend to a large portion of Cubans and a large portion of Hispanics, especially in places like California. California is where I'm really thinking of. They tend. I mean, if you go to the U.S. Census, there is a white with Hispanic, something of that combination. You can be white and Hispanic on the U.S. Census. So you can be both.
I
Charles,
put
are you
other.
still there?
I mean by white and Hispanic. So I think I don't want the stream to be more than an hour 30 minutes. I know Steve just came and he has a lot of stuff for us, but we have to maybe move
Yeah,
some
go
of the
ahead.
other
I'm
conversation.
I'm bogging us down. I admit.
So Steve, this is 1 hour 28 minutes. I want to end the stream in the next 2 minutes. So let's hear from you.
Um, I'm not on my top game today. I apologize.
Yeah.
Um, I think to some degree, Adam is valid in his argument that people's identity matter to them, and when they're either ignored or however you want to put it, I think that's very off-putting to a voter, and I think that's one of the things that Republicans are suffering from is they choose to actively ignore things that influence people's lives in their in their world. I can't say that Adam's wrong, but I hesitate to say he's completely right either. Also, that comes down to the fact that I don't have the same experiences as Adam does with, with his life. But if I saw a voter completely, or I'm sorry, if I saw a politician completely ignoring very serious aspects of my life, like let's say that I saw Democrats actively trying to attack fatherhood, or ignore fatherhood as a major role in my life, I would tend to not vote for them. I vote with my interests. I vote where my interests lie, and my interests lie in certain specific things. Now, I will almost majoritively vote Republican over Democrat every day because there's only one of those groups that actively protects my Second Amendment rights. So in some cases, it comes down to one factor, and some voting cycles it is about race. It's about other things, but it's about what affects my life directly. Um, I don't know how to vote for someone else. I know how to vote for me.
Cool. Stanley, final thoughts.
I think that Adam Coleman, um, I think that many Black conservatives, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, are more concerned with protecting white feelings than they are in combating racism. Because America is
maybe they don't see racism as that important. So maybe
well,
you're
you know
reading it.
what?
You're
I
reading
bet their
into that.
grandparents did.
Yeah, but they're
And
not their
we haven't
grandparents.
come that far.
They're not their grandparents. I think we've come that far. You yourself said we've come that far.
And dude, I live here in the
Yeah,
South,
yeah,
in Georgia, and
Mhm.
we have come far,
Mhm.
but we are not where we need to be.
True. Yeah.
And
2% racism is still racism, but it's different from
I
80%
think that
racism.
Adam Coleman and Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter, they would rather, and John, Glenn, and maybe Adam too, because Adam, not in the last podcast, but when you interviewed him a couple weeks ago, he basically kind of imitated or kind of made Glenn's point that, we need to stop because if we make white people mad, they have more guns. And I'm like, you know what? You care more about white people's feelings and making them mad than you do in making improvements to the country. And I don't agree that protecting white people's feelings is best for the country.
So I think you might be right in that critique. I have noticed that some black conservatives are, it's almost as if they are playing to a certain crowd, right? It's as if they don't want to, as you put it, they don't want to offend white feelings. I
Well,
don't have, I don't have that
Larry Elder
kind.
comes to mind.
Yeah, because there's
no
some.
one wants to be intentionally offensive, but sometimes, the truth shall set you free.
Yeah, yeah. So the performative nature of some conservatives is what bothers me, right? I just feel that some of the times they're quite performative. I don't give a shit. I will say it the way it is, right? If it's going to offend Republicans, good. If it's going to offend white people, good. If it's going to offend black people, good. I mean, I genuinely really do not give a shit. I only give a shit what I believe to be true at any point in time. So, but I don't see.
Well,
I think they've pigeonholed themselves. They might have started out with good intentions, but they somehow pigeonholed themselves into a place where they've gotten a very large following of a certain demographic. Now they have to be very careful. They have to choose their words not to offend their base. And I think that's a
right.
captive way of living your life.
I agree with that. If it comes down to, protecting, your income stream, how is that not a bad faith position?
Right.
Thinking,
Immediately starts out in bad faith.
I'm thinking of who's the dude who was on Tucker Carlson few like 3 weeks ago, right after the Memphis you know cop issue.
I don't know. I don't watch trash cable television.
Well, no, he made this dude made a really interesting argument about the black female Memphis police chief. He equated her to a single mother, and the five bad cops to black
That was
boys
just such a
being raised
stupid
by a
thing.
single
That
mother.
was that was just such a stupid thing to say. I
No,
mean,
it wasn't stupid. It was offensive.
yeah.
Oh,
Both
you
those
don't
things.
get to be police chief of a major southern city because you're acting like a welfare mother. The woman
Yeah,
is accomplished.
over 30 years on the force.
Yeah, that's that. How offensive can you be?
No, I think
Apparently,
the
pretty offensive.
all right, guys. Thank you very much, Steve and Stanley, my people, my personal people. Always always coming through for me, and I always love having conversations with you guys.
Yeah, it was
So
fun.
yeah, 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 yeah. So
Always. I just apologize that I'm not feeling well.
no, please,
Ah, you
Steve,
were
you need to
fine.
take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself. Please get
And,
better.
and
Yeah.
and now he has to go. The genius has to go back to sleep.
All right, guys. Thank you, work. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, Antebellum
Okay.
Black American. Thank you, everyone that came to the stream today. Thank you, Christina Bang. I know Christina Bang and Melinda Sandler. They are they are they are my most consistent watchers. And then they
Yeah.
always turn up. They always turn up, and I really really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate you guys watching. That you find whatever thing we're saying here interesting enough to listen to. So I will keep doing what we keep doing, even if it's just two people watching. I will keep doing what I keep doing. I'm not going to change my message. I'm just going to do what I think is right and what I believe to be true at any point in time. So thank you guys for coming, and it's bye for now.